The first laugh came before Ethan Cole had even finished signing his name. It rolled across the polished training floor like something rehearsed, sharp, confident, cruel enough to make several heads turn. 20 men stood inside Grant Dynamics' private executive security assessment room, all built like they had been carved for intimidation. Former Marines, private contractors, competitive fighters, men wearing compression shirts, stretched over muscle and expensive confidence. Ethan looked like he had walked into the wrong building. His dark jacket was faded at the cuff, his boots worn clean by years of use, and the folder under his arm had a bent corner where someone, probably his 8-year-old daughter that morning, had doodled a tiny smiley face in blue ink. He noticed the laughter but kept walking. Shoulders, relaxed eyes moving once across the room in a way so subtle almost nobody caught. It exits. Mirrors, blind corners, ceiling cameras, reflective glass, emergency sprinklers, 2 security doors, 1 vent loose in the upper wall. By the time he reached the registration desk, he already knew which camera had a delayed sweep and which guard near the north entrance kept favoring his right knee. Name, the receptionist asked. Ethan Cole. Former employer, freelance contract work. That triggered another laugh. A tall man with shoulders like a freight truck stepped forward, cracking his knuckles loudly enough to invite attention. Victor Kane, the favorite among the applicants, former televised combat athlete, undefeated in 2 corporate protection circuits, a man who looked engineered for intimidation. He glanced at Ethan's paperwork and smirked. Freelance? That mean lawn mowing or dog walking? A few applicants laughed harder this time. Someone added, maybe he's here to fix the air conditioning. Even behind the glass observation wall above them, a few executives exchanged amused looks. On the upper platform, Olivia Grant, CEO of Grant Dynamics, stood with folded arms, expression unreadable, watching the man in worn boots who looked nothing like the others. She had approved 1 final open slot for the tryout after an anonymous recommendation arrived without credentials, without references, just 1 line. If he shows up, watch his hands, not his resume. Victor stepped closer, chest out, deliberately invading Ethan's space. You sure you're in the right room, old man? Ethan lifted his eyes for the first time and met Victor's stare with calm so flat it almost felt impolite. Depends, he said quietly. Is this the room where people mistake size for skill? The laughter stopped just enough for tension to breathe. Victor grinned the dangerous grin of someone eager to make an example. Good, he said, backing toward the sparring circle. Because first elimination starts now. Trainers turned. Applicants gathered. Olivia leaned slightly closer to the glass. Victor launched forward with the speed of a charging heavyweight. 1 brutal step, shoulder angled for impact, then in less than 2 seconds, Ethan moved. Not backward, not sideways, forward. 1 hand trapped the wrist, the other rotated under Victor's elbow. Hips turned, balance broken. Victor's body lifted off the floor and crashed flat onto the mat so hard the impact echoed through the room like a gunshot. Silence hit. Full silence. Victor gasped, stunned, staring upward before he even understood he had fallen. And at that exact second, every alarm in the building exploded red. Emergency lights flashed. A female voice screamed somewhere above executive level. Then a security officer shouted through comms, armed breach CEO floor. Ethan did not look at Victor again. He looked up straight toward Olivia Grant, as if he had already known where the danger would begin. Ethan moved before anyone with authority gave permission. The alarm had not yet finished its second pulse when he crossed. The sparring mat stepped over Victor Kane's stunned body and reached the security door just as 2 internal guards collided with each other trying to unlock it. Red emergency lights washed the room in violent color, flattening every face into panic. Above the observation glass, executives who had been watching a recruitment exercise seconds earlier were suddenly shouting over each other, phones out, voices sharp with confusion. Olivia Grant disappeared from the glass platform the instant the first alert reached her floor, and that single detail sharpened Ethan's focus more than the alarm itself. A CEO did not leave the protected deck unless someone had either moved her or forced movement. "Stand down," Applicant One guard barked, putting an arm across Ethan's chest. Ethan caught the wrist gently but firmly, turning just enough for the man to feel how easily the joint could break. "Your camera sweep on level 12 is blind every 6 seconds," Ethan said, voice flat, already reading the monitor reflection on the opposite wall. "If someone timed the breach, they're already inside your corridor." The guard hesitated, not because of the words, but because Ethan said them without adrenaline, as if he were stating weather. That fraction of hesitation was enough for Ethan to slide past him, hit the emergency release, and force the door open into the executive stairwell. Behind him, Victor pushed himself upright, rage and humiliation burning hotter now that everyone had seen him flattened in one move. "You don't run security here," Victor shouted. "You're not hired." Ethan ignored him and took the stairs 3 at a time. On level 8, he heard the first wrong sound, not gunfire, not shouting silence where trained response should have been. Security failures were loud in one place and quiet in another. Quiet meant control had already been taken. He reached level 10 and saw one guard unconscious near the landing badge, gone radio, crushed under his shoulder. Ethan crouched only 1 second, checked pulse, noticed injection mark at the neck. Sedative fast-acting. Professional. No amateur intruder carried clean sedation darts into a corporate tower unless someone inside knew the building response pattern. By level 11, his breathing remained even, but a different pulse had entered him, the old one, the one he had spent years burying beneath school lunches, unpaid rent, and bedtime stories. The one that remembered doors blown open in foreign cities, remembered how danger arrived dressed as routine. He hated how naturally his body welcomed it back. At the executive floor corridor, the doors opened to chaos held under unnatural restraint. One receptionist crouched behind a marble desk, crying silently. 2 office assistants stood frozen near the elevators because nobody had told them whether moving made survival worse. A dropped phone vibrated on the floor. But the strangest thing was what Ethan noticed first: one corridor camera pointed at the wall, deliberately turned. Someone had prepared this. "Where is Olivia Grant?" Ethan asked the receptionist. She looked up, recognized him only as the man from downstairs, then pointed toward the east board corridor with shaking fingers. 2 men. Security uniforms. They said evacuation. Ethan was already moving before she finished. His steps stayed soundless despite boots that looked too old for this building. At the east corridor corner, voices emerged, one male controlled, one female, cold and furious. "Olivia, take your hand off that door," she said somewhere ahead. "You don't work for me." Ethan slowed just enough to approach without silhouette exposure, using the wall reflection in a glass award display before exposing his body. 2 men in security uniform stood near the CEO briefing room. One had his hand near a concealed weapon, but his stance betrayed him instantly. Not Grant Dynamics staff, too much weight on the front foot, military trained but rushed. Olivia stood 3 feet away, chin lifted, refusing fear even while boxed in. One of the fake guards noticed movement too late. Ethan closed the distance in silence, grabbed the nearer attacker by collar and wrist, slammed him shoulder first into the wall hard enough to knock breath out before the second man reached for his weapon. Olivia dropped instantly. Good instincts, while Ethan drove an elbow into the second attacker's throat, ripped the weapon free, reversed it, and pinned the man face first against the glass. The first attacker tried to recover. Ethan struck once under the jaw. Both dropped within seconds. Olivia rose slowly, hair loosened from its earlier precision, eyes sharp not with gratitude, but calculation. She looked at the unconscious men, then at Ethan. "Who exactly are you?" He checked the hallway before answering. "Right now, the only person in this building who noticed your evacuation team wore the wrong shoes." She looked down. He was right. Grant Security wore matte, tactical soles. These men wore polished issue boots. Tiny difference. Fatal difference. "You were downstairs," she said. At the tryout. Still technically unemployed. Before she could respond, one of the unconscious attackers reached toward his collar. Ethan saw the movement, ripped the collar transmitter free before the man could trigger it. A tiny encrypted communicator blinked red. Olivia stared at it. That isn't standard black market equipment. No, Ethan said. It's expensive, coordinated. Someone funded this. Footsteps thundered from behind Victor Kane and two real guards finally arriving, breathing hard, eager to reclaim authority. Victor stopped when he saw both intruders down and Ethan holding the weapon. Put that down, Victor snapped as if recovering pride mattered more than context. Now. Ethan handed the weapon grip first to the nearest guard without looking at Victor. Check chamber. Ceramic rounds. The guard did, and his face changed immediately. Victor hated that expression more than he hated Ethan. Olivia noticed both. Seal this floor, she ordered. No one enters without my authorization. Then, to Ethan. Come with me. Victor opened his mouth, but Olivia cut him off without turning. Not you. That landed harder than the throw downstairs. She led Ethan into the briefing room, a glass-walled executive chamber overlooking half the city, now flooded in emergency crimson from alarm lights outside. The skyline beyond remained calm, indifferent, while inside the room, tension thickened. Start talking, Olivia said. Who trained you? Ethan remained near the wall, instinctively choosing angle over comfort. Long time ago. That answer usually means military. Usually. And today, she asked. Today means my daughter's school called twice because I missed pick-up-backup instructions while your building alarm screamed through half the district. Something shifted in her face, not softness, but recalibration. You have a daughter 8, and you still ran toward armed men. Ethan gave a faint glance toward the unconscious attacker visible through the glass outside. Running away rarely improves armed men. Before she could press further, Nina Brooks entered, fast tablet in hand, internal security tension written across her face. Nina stopped when she saw Ethan standing beside the CEO like he belonged there. Ma'am, our system logs were wiped for exactly 90 seconds before breach point. Internal access credentials were used. Olivia took the tablet. Internal meaning? Nina hesitated. Someone with level 4 clearance or above. Silence settled differently now. Less panic, more poison. Olivia's own executive circle had fewer than 10 level 4 credentials. Ethan saw her realize that and also saw what she hid immediately after betrayal had a face. She just did not know which one yet. Nina looked at Ethan again. Who is he? Olivia answered first. The reason I'm not downstairs in an ambulance. Nina's eyes narrowed, not hostile but careful. We haven't cleared him. Ethan almost smiled at that. Smart woman. You shouldn't, he said. Check my name. You'll find very little. That's not reassuring, Nina replied. It's honest. Her tablet pinged. She glanced down, frowned. There's another issue. HR says his applicant file was submitted anonymously this morning. No digital trace before 9:14. Olivia looked up slowly. Anonymous. Ethan finally seemed uncomfortable, not from suspicion, but because he had expected paperwork, not mystery. I filed it myself yesterday in person. Nina turned the tablet toward him. Then someone replaced it. That landed harder than accusation because Ethan knew instantly what that meant. Somebody had wanted him in the building but not documented properly. Not random chance. He thought of the handwritten note in the envelope that had arrived at his apartment 2 nights earlier. Grant Dynamics hiring executive security, ask for final slot. Thursday, 10 a.m. No sender, no explanation. He had nearly ignored it until Mia asked if maybe it was one of those strange, lucky things adults always miss. Now luck looked like bait. Olivia saw the realization cross his face. You didn't come here by accident either, did you? Before he answered, Ethan's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, Mia's school. Third call. For the first time since entering the building, his jaw tightened. Olivia noticed. Answer it. He did. Mr. Cole. The teacher said, voice strained but polite. Mia says not to worry. But pickup authorization expired 20 minutes ago. Ethan closed his eyes 1 second. I'm delayed. I'll fix it. Mia's voice suddenly came through faintly in the background. Dad. Did you get the job? He looked through the glass at unconscious intruders, armed guards flashing alarms and a billionaire CEO studying him like a classified file that had just breathed. Not yet, he said quietly. Still trying. Mia answered with complete confidence only children possessed. You will. The line ended. Silence returned, but changed again. Olivia folded her arms. Mr. Cole, until I know who arranged your file and who arranged armed men in my hallway, nobody leaves this floor without my approval, including you. Ethan nodded once. Then lock your boardroom too. Why? He looked toward the corridor where executives were beginning to gather in frightened clusters beyond glass. Because whoever failed to kidnap you may still be sitting at your next meeting table. Outside, Victor Kane stood at the far end of the corridor watching through the glass. Humiliation now replaced by something darker, resentment sharpened by fear that Ethan had just become indispensable. And above them all, unseen in another office, one executive quietly deleted a second set of access logs before security could reach his terminal. The real attack, Ethan understood, had only just begun. The boardroom on level 12 had been designed to intimidate investors before a single word was spoken. 40 feet of dark glass, a table cut from one slab of black walnut city skyline behind reinforced windows and hidden acoustic panels that swallowed whispers before they became rumors. Tonight, though, the room felt less like power and more like a trap politely pretending to be architecture. Olivia Grant stood at the head of the table while her senior executives gathered in uneven silence, each face carrying a different version of controlled alarm. Daniel Reeves arrived last, immaculate. As always, silver tie perfectly centered, breathing just hard enough to suggest concern, but not panic. Nina Brooks remained near the interior wall with a tablet tracking live security feeds now partially restored. Ethan stood beside the door, not seated, not invited into the circle, but impossible to ignore. Victor Kane, furious at being excluded earlier, had somehow forced his way back into the room under the excuse of assisting internal security. His bruised pride sat on his face more visibly than the red mark near his jaw where Ethan had dropped him downstairs. No one addressed it directly, but everyone saw it. Olivia placed both hands on the table and let the silence tighten until it hurt. Someone used executive-level access to place armed imposters on my floor, she said. Before we proceed with any normal discussion, I want to know why camera loop failures began exactly 3 minutes before our security test downstairs. Daniel frowned with practiced disbelief. You think someone here coordinated that I think facts don't care what I think, Olivia replied. And facts suggest internal assistance. Victor folded his arms. With respect, maybe focus on why an unverified applicant is standing in your boardroom holding tactical opinions like he owns the building. Ethan did not react. Olivia did. He's standing because he prevented an abduction. Victor leaned forward. Or staged one. That made several heads turn. Nina's eyes narrowed immediately. Ethan finally looked at Victor calm enough to make the accusation sound childish before he even answered. If I staged it, you'd still be on the floor downstairs wondering what happened. Victor took a step, but Olivia cut him off with one word. Enough. Then she looked at Ethan. Earlier you said my attackers wore the wrong shoes before anyone else noticed. How Ethan glanced toward the corridor glass where guards moved outside. Because trained private teams usually standardize silent tread. Those men wore military issue with polished edge. Someone wanted them to look like corporate security at distance, not survive close inspection. Daniel's expression shifted by half a degree, small enough for most people to miss. Ethan did not miss it. And that means what Daniel asked. It means whoever hired them expected confusion, not prolonged contact, Ethan answered. Fast extraction. 90 seconds. Maybe less. Nina lifted her tablet. That matches our deleted feed window. Daniel gave a tight smile. Interesting analysis from a freelance contractor. Ethan met the smile without warmth. Former protective intelligence. That landed softly but changed the air. Olivia caught it first. Protective intelligence for who Ethan did not answer immediately. He rarely spoke about that period, because names led to memories, and memories led to nights Mia sometimes found him awake at the kitchen table, staring at nothing until sunrise. Mostly people who couldn't afford mistakes, he said at last. Diplomats, witnesses, temporary assignments overseas. Victor snorted. Conveniently vague. Ethan ignored him. Nina, however, was already typing. No public file under your recent name. Ethan's jaw moved once. Recent name? Olivia asked. He realized too late he had revealed too much. Long story. Before Olivia could push harder, Nina's screen flashed again. Ma'am, we have badge movement on level 10. Someone just used your deputy authorization to access archive servers. Olivia looked at Daniel automatically because only 3 deputies had that level of permission. Daniel spread his hands instantly. I've been here. Ethan was already moving toward the door. Archive access after a breach means cleanup. Olivia followed without hesitation. Nina with me. Victor, stay here. Victor bristled. You're sending him again? Olivia did not slow down, because he keeps arriving before danger does. The hallway swallowed them into urgent motion. Ethan moved differently now that the building had revealed itself as hostile territory, less like an applicant, more like a man reacquainting himself with instincts he had promised never to need again. Elevators were too exposed, so he chose the service stairs. Nina followed, trying to keep pace while pulling floor maps. Olivia descended behind them in heels until Ethan stopped, looked down and without speaking, kicked open a maintenance locker, pulled out rubber overshoes used by janitorial staff and handed them to her. Less noise, he said. Olivia stared for one beat, then put them on without complaint. The absurdity almost broke Nina's tension for half a second. On level 10, the archive corridor lights flickered. One server room door stood ajar. Ethan raised one hand, stopping both women before they crossed the threshold. Why stop? Olivia whispered. He pointed to the floor. Tiny reflective wire at ankle height stretched across the doorway. Nina inhaled sharply. Trip alarm. Ethan leaned closer. No. Trigger. He used a badge from his pocket, the one stolen from an attacker upstairs, to lift the wire free. Inside the room, one terminal remained active, screen filled with deleted access logs. A shadow moved behind the far server rack. Ethan crossed the room instantly. Metal crashed. Someone bolted toward the rear exit. Nina shouted. Olivia saw only fragments, Ethan grabbing a shoulder, the fleeing figure twisting free, a badge snapping off emergency door slamming shut. By the time guards arrived, the intruder was gone but not empty-handed. Ethan looked down at what remained in his hand, half a torn ID strip. Department code visible. Finance. Olivia took it. Her eyes hardened. Finance. Nina checked quickly. That badge prefix belongs to Executive Audit Access. Daniel's division touched audit reports every quarter. Nobody said his name, but everyone thought it. Ethan stepped toward the terminal and scanned the open deletion trail. They weren't erasing breach footage first, he said. They were looking for old personnel records. Nina froze. Whose Ethan touched the screen once opening cached fragments. His own name appeared older clearance tier, archived under restricted external consultant contracts from 9 years earlier. Olivia read it before he could close it. Ethan Mercer Cole, Federal Protective Liaison Clearance / Restricted Deployment Authorization. She looked at him slowly. Mercer. He exhaled once. Middle name used on classified contracts. Nina stared now with entirely different suspicion, not whether he belonged here, but how much history had just walked voluntarily into their crisis. Olivia's voice lowered. You worked federal witness corridors. Until I stopped. Why stop? The answer arrived not from Ethan, but from his phone vibrating again. School. He hesitated this time because guilt hit harder when danger paused long enough for ordinary life to intrude. Olivia noticed and nodded once. Take it, he answered. Mia's voice came first this time, cheerful because children hear tension differently. Dad? Ms. Harper says if you're still working, I can stay for art club. Ethan turned slightly away from the others. You ate something half a sandwich. Half. The other half was ugly. Despite everything, his mouth almost smiled. Ugly food still counts. Mia lowered her voice conspiratorially. Did you win? He looked at Olivia. Nina, the broken server logs, the torn finance badge. Not finished yet. You sound like your serious voice, Mia said. That means somebody lied near you. Olivia heard that line and looked at him sharply. Children did not invent observations like that unless they had seen too much truth in silence. I'll come soon, Ethan said. Promise. A pause. He hated promises because work had once made one impossible to keep. Yes, he said anyway. After the line ended, the room felt briefly smaller. Olivia studied him not as asset now, but as contradiction. A man with federal clearance ghosts worn boots, and a daughter who recognized danger through tone alone. Nina broke the silence. Someone searched your old records today before the breach. Ethan nodded slowly. Then whoever invited me here knew exactly who I used to be. You think the anonymous note was bait? Olivia asked. Either bait, Ethan said, or warning, before anyone could decide which the building lights died. Full blackout. Emergency red returned half a second later, weaker now, pulsing through the server room like blood under skin. Nina cursed softly. Backup grid shouldn't fail. Ethan already knew what that meant, stage 2. Then the fire alarm triggered not the breach alarm, but evacuation protocol. Synthetic voice echoed through all levels. Immediate building evacuation. Proceed to nearest exit. Olivia looked up sharply. I didn't authorize evacuation. Ethan met her eyes. Exactly why you don't move. Through the dark corridor outside came running footsteps and distant shouting from multiple floors. Controlled panic had now become weaponized panic. Somewhere above them, glass shattered. Nina checked her tablet dead signal. Victor's voice suddenly came through the hallway shouting Olivia's name from too far away to trust direction. Ethan moved to the door, listening, body angled. Someone wants you in motion, he said quietly. And in this building, moving is where they can predict you. Olivia's voice stayed calm but colder now than before. Then tell me where they can't. Ethan looked toward the maintenance shaft at the far wall old access ladder hidden behind cooling ducts. Places executives never notice. Another crash echoed overhead. Then a single gunshot from level 11. Nina looked at Olivia. Olivia looked at Ethan. For the first time since the day began, she gave him authority without words. And Ethan understood with terrifying clarity that whoever had begun this was no longer testing security. They were collapsing the building around one woman while making it look procedural. Somewhere in that chaos, someone inside Grant Dynamics still believed he had not yet figured out where the real attack would end. The maintenance shaft smelled of dust, old wiring, and forgotten infrastructure, exactly the kind of place billion-dollar companies ignored because polished surfaces above made people believe control existed everywhere. Ethan climbed first, one hand on the ladder, the other guiding Olivia upward through the narrow steel frame, while Nina followed below, carrying the dead tablet like a habit she had not yet admitted was useless. Outside the shaft walls, the tower trembled with engineered panic alarms. Distant shouting elevator locks, slamming emergency announcements, repeating instructions that were now clearly designed to herd rather than protect. Ethan stopped halfway between floors and listened. Above them, footsteps crossed level 11 in uneven rhythm, too many to be security, too coordinated to be fleeing staff. "They're staging movement toward the south exits," he whispered. Olivia looked up from below. "Why south?" "Because your boardroom has line of sight from the south terrace." Nina understood first. "Sniper angle?" Ethan nodded once. "If evacuation sends executives there, one shot finishes the story and panic explains the rest." Olivia's jaw hardened, but fear still did not appear. What appeared instead was anger colder than fear because anger sharpened memory. Daniel scheduled tonight's investor emergency review in the boardroom because he said the South Terrace route was best for controlled extraction. Ethan resumed climbing. Then Daniel either knows the attack pattern or wrote it. They emerged behind a service grate near Level 12's internal records corridor. The floor looked abandoned at first glance, but Ethan had long ago learned that empty spaces in danger were never empty. They were waiting. He crouched near the grate, studying reflections in polished floor trim rather than exposing his head first. Two armed figures moved near the boardroom entrance, both wearing internal tactical jackets now stripped of visible badges. One guarded the corridor. The other placed something beneath the conference table through the half-open boardroom door. Olivia saw it too and whispered, "That's my boardroom." Ethan's voice dropped lower. "And that's not a bomb." Nina narrowed her eyes. "Then what directional suppressor?" "Small caliber burst, loud enough to create chaos, precise enough to kill one target and wound two others." Olivia understood instantly. Assassination disguised as crossfire. Ethan looked back at her. "Who sits at the head of that table?" She answered without hesitation. "I do." He waited 3 seconds, mapping the corridor in his head. Old training returned completely now, not as violence, but as timing. The guard nearest the corridor shifted weight every 4 seconds onto his left leg. Old knee injury. The second man inside the boardroom kept glancing at the window because he expected another signal. Coordinated teams always did that. They trusted external timing too much. Ethan reached into the maintenance panel beside him, found a steel access wrench, and handed it to Nina. "When I move, lock the boardroom interior door behind me." Nina blinked. "That's not standard security procedure. Neither is surviving this building tonight." Olivia caught his sleeve before he moved. "If Daniel is involved, he won't be alone." Ethan looked at her hand, then at her face. People who arrange this never stand nearest the weapon. They stand nearest the explanation afterward. Then he moved. Fast enough that the first guard only registered motion before Ethan's forearm hit his throat and drove him sideways into the wall with a crack that silenced him instantly. The second man turned inside the boardroom, weapon half raised, but Nina slammed the boardroom door inward exactly as Ethan entered, throwing the shooter off angle. 2 shots burst into the ceiling instead of chest height. Ethan crossed the room before the second shot's echo died, struck the shooter's wrist, disarmed him, and drove him over the conference table hard enough to splinter one edge of polished walnut. Olivia entered 1 second later and stopped cold because Daniel Reeves stood near the far side of the room with 3 executives behind him, all pretending surprise too slowly, too carefully. Daniel's face performed concern with expensive precision. "What is happening?" he demanded, but the question arrived too late because Ethan had already noticed what Daniel failed to hide. His right hand held the remote trigger for the suppressor device under the table. Tiny black switch. Thumb ready. Ethan saw it and lunged exactly as Daniel pressed. The device detonated not explosive force, but compressed ballistic release aimed toward the chair where Olivia should have been standing. Because Ethan hit Daniel's arm mid-trigger, the burst tore through the glass wall instead, spraying the skyline behind them into shards. Olivia ducked as fragments exploded across the room. One executive screamed, another dropped flat. Daniel staggered backward, losing the trigger, but not composure. "You insane fool!" he shouted, pointing at Ethan instantly. He triggered it. Security! That might have worked if Olivia had not seen Ethan's hand bleeding where he had intercepted the firing angle. Blood ran from a deep cut across his palm, where shattered glass and metal tore skin open. He barely looked at it. His eyes stayed on Daniel. Your thumb was on the switch. Daniel straightened his tie with terrifying calm, as if etiquette still mattered inside attempted murder. And now we're taking accusations from a false applicant with erased federal files. Nina stepped forward, wrench still in hand, breathing hard. Finance badge from Archive Access belongs to your audit division. Daniel did not even blink. Finance handles half this building. Olivia's voice cut through all of them like steel. Then explain why the suppressor under my table uses procurement code from a vendor only approved through executive operations. Daniel's eyes changed, then not panic, but the small, dead look of someone whose preferred script had failed and was already calculating the next version. He smiled faintly. Because someone in executive operations is tired of watching this company die slowly while you protect sentiment over profit. That confession did not arrive dramatic. It arrived almost tired, which made it uglier. You arranged armed men in my hallway because of quarterly pressure, Olivia asked. No, Daniel said. I arranged correction because your refusal to approve Helix merger exposure cost us $200 million in silent commitments. Nina stared. Helix isn't a merger. It's a shell acquisition. Daniel looked at her with mild pity. Exactly. Which is why you were never invited to understand it. Olivia took one step closer despite broken glass underfoot. You tried to kill me over fraud. Daniel laughed softly. No, Olivia. I tried to remove hesitation before investors discovered how much of Grant Dynamics survives only because I delayed collapse for 18 months. That hit differently because buried inside the betrayal sat partial truth. The company had been under hidden strain, but Daniel had turned weakness into leverage. Ethan saw something else too. Daniel was speaking too long, which meant he expected interruption. External support. He turned toward the shattered boardroom glass just as movement flashed on the opposite rooftop. Sniper silhouette. Down, he shouted, already moving. Olivia reacted instantly, but Nina was half a second slower. Ethan threw Olivia sideways behind the table as the first sniper round shattered the interior projector wall where her head had been. The second round came lower. Ethan pulled Nina down by the shoulder. Glass exploded again. Executives screamed and crawled. Daniel ran not toward safety, but toward the side door where he clearly expected extraction. Ethan saw it and had one impossible second pursue Daniel or shield Olivia from the next shot. He chose Olivia. The third round hit the chair behind her instead of her spine because Ethan covered the angle with his own body shoulder, taking impact from shattered metal fragments that tore through his jacket. Pain flashed white, but he stayed upright. Nina grabbed the fallen tactical weapon from the earlier attacker, crawled to the side panel, and slammed emergency steel shutters over the shattered glass. Darkness dropped across the skyline with brutal finality. Inside the boardroom, everyone breathed like survivors who did not yet trust survival. Daniel was gone. The side door still swung open. Olivia looked at Ethan and saw blood now at his shoulder and hand, both jacket darkening fast. You're hit. Not deep. Ethan lied automatically. Nina moved to the corridor door, checked outside, then looked back with fury. Daniel cleared south elevator manually. He had escape route ready. Olivia stood slowly, rage now fully visible. Lock every floor. Nobody leaves this tower. Ethan pressed his bleeding palm against the table edge to stay steady. Adrenaline kept him vertical, but only barely. Olivia noticed that too, and noticed the old scar beneath his sleeve where another bullet years earlier had once passed through almost the same side. How many times have you done this? She asked quietly. Ethan looked toward the dark shutter where sniper rounds still faintly ticked against steel outside. For 1 second, he did not answer as executive sirens rose again through the tower. Then his phone vibrated. Mia. The sound in that ruined boardroom felt almost impossible. He answered because after bullets, a child's voice became the only thing that still sounded clean. Dad. Mia asked softly, "Are you driving yet?" Ethan closed his eyes 1 second. Olivia and Nina both heard the tremor he hid from everyone else. Soon. You promised pizza if job interview went well. Blood slipped between his fingers onto polished walnut. Then pizza still stands. Mia lowered her voice. You sound hurt. Ethan opened his eyes and looked directly at Olivia, as if the answer belonged to more than one person now. Just tired. Mia answered with complete certainty. Mom used to say, tired voices happen when brave people don't sit down soon enough. The line ended, but the words stayed suspended in the ruined room. Olivia looked at the blood, the shattered boardroom, the chair where she should have died, and the man who had arrived in worn boots, carrying a bent folder with a child's drawing. Then she turned toward the executive still hiding under glass and fear. Her voice came colder than any alarm the building had sounded that night. Emergency board session begins now. Anyone still loyal to Daniel Reeves should leave before security finds you first. And somewhere below them, Daniel entered the underground parking deck, believing he still had one final move left before Ethan Cole learned who had sent the anonymous note that brought him into the tower at exactly the hour assassination became profitable. The underground parking deck no longer echoed with panic from above. It carried a colder sound now, measured footsteps, distant engine hum, the metallic drip of water from overhead pipes, the kind of silence that usually came after violence when truth had not yet decided who it belonged to. Daniel Reeves moved quickly between black executive vehicles, phone pressed to his ear. Voice low and controlled, still believing control could survive if he reached the exit ramp before Olivia locked external access. "Get the south gate open now," he hissed. "No delays." But the gate did not rise. Instead, the overhead lights snapped fully on row after row, revealing Ethan standing near the concrete column ahead, one hand pressed against his injured shoulder, the other hanging loose at his side, as if pain had become something he had postponed rather than defeated. Daniel stopped. For the first time that night, his expression lost polish. "You should be upstairs bleeding dramatically for sympathy," he said. Ethan's voice stayed quiet. "You should have left before trying to explain greed like philosophy." Daniel looked around, calculating Angle's exit's distance to his car. "You think Olivia wins because she survives one night? Investors will destroy her by morning." Maybe, Ethan said, taking one step forward. But murder usually hurts quarterly reports. Daniel reached suddenly inside his coat. But before the motion finished, Olivia's voice cut through the deck from behind. "Don't." She emerged with Nina and two armed internal officers at her side, heels sharp against concrete, face pale but unwavering. Daniel froze, then slowly withdrew not a gun but a thin envelope. He almost smiled. "Then before you arrest me, you should know who invited him." He tossed the envelope toward Olivia. Inside was the handwritten note that had arrived at Ethan's apartment. On the back, a single name, Laura Cole. Ethan stared before Olivia even spoke. Laura, his late wife. Impossible. Nina checked the rest of the envelope and found a printout attached beneath it. Archived email recovery from years earlier delayed through legal hold. Laura had once worked temporary compliance review under federal subcontract auditing Grant Dynamics before her death, and 3 weeks before the convoy attack that killed her, she had flagged Daniel's shell company transfers under a sealed review code no one had reopened until now. Daniel's voice sharpened bitterness, replacing elegance. She found too much, and then the wrong convoy was hit. Tragic timing became useful paperwork. Ethan did not move for several seconds because grief after years does not explode, it arrives like weight returning exactly where you had learned to walk around it. Olivia looked at him and understood that beneath tonight's blood and precision stood a man who had unknowingly walked back into the same corruption that had broken his life years earlier. Daniel saw that pause and tried one final move, lunging toward the side lane, but Nina's officers took him down hard before he reached the next pillar. The sound of handcuffs closing ended the night more completely than the alarms had. Later, long after statements were taken and ambulances left, Ethan sat in the now quiet executive lobby while a medic wrapped his shoulder. Olivia stood near the glass entrance watching dawn begin to pale the city. "You saved my company," she said. Ethan shook his head slightly. "No. I just stopped one man from finishing what he started." "And what starts now?" she asked. Before he answered, the lobby doors opened and Mia ran in wearing her school sweater art folder still under one arm because Nina had personally gone to bring her after the tower cleared. She crossed the marble floor without hesitation and stopped only when she saw the bandage. "You said tired," she accused softly. Ethan smiled for the first real time that night and knelt despite the pain. Turns out brave people should sit down sooner. Mia hugged him carefully, then looked up at Olivia with childlike seriousness. "Did he get the job?" Olivia crouched to her hide eyes softer than they had been all night. "Only if he agrees." Mia studied Ethan, then nodded as if approving terms adults had delayed too long. Outside, the first sunlight touched the glass facade of Grant Dynamics, and for the first time since entering the building, Ethan felt something unfamiliar return, not the old instinct for danger, but the quieter possibility that maybe protecting one future no longer meant running forever from the past.